I'm facing a bit of a challenge. I am 500 tons short on silage this year. Yep, you heard it correctly. 500 ton. That's quite a bit more than I expected, but don't worry, I have a plan. And the key to that plan is right here. Now, we have never used a feeder wagon on this farm, so this is definitely going to be a learning experience for me, but hopefully all of you will learn something as well. I mean, if you're a dairy farmer who uses a feeder wagon, you're definitely not going to learn anything from me, but for the rest of you, you might learn something. Before I get started on how I plan to make up the 500 ton shortfall, let me give you a recap as to how we ended up in this situation. Spring 2024 started badly and it continued badly. The rain made it impossible to get jobs done when you should have. Slurry was a challenge and fertilizer was impossible. We didn't get our grazing block sowed until the 2nd of March. Usually we're straight in at the start of February, and that had a knock-on effect later in the year. And even when we finally did get the fertilizer out onto the grazing block, we made a bit of a mess doing it. We didn't get most of our silage ground slurried until the first few weeks of March as well, which just put everything back. When we eventually got the slurry done and the fertilizer out, then our attention turned to trying to get our cows out to the field to graze, because by this point we had ate all of the silage surplus we had the year previously. The cows eventually did make it to the field on the 1st of April, which was only about 5 or 6 days later than our average. However, as you can see from these drone shots, there was very little grass in the field. The cold wet weather, the late fertilizer had really hampered growth, and that means that whilst our cows might have been in the field, they really weren't eating a lot of grazed grass. 2 days later, on the 3rd of April, we finally got some fertilizer onto our silage fields. I genuinely had a 1-day window to get this done, and I was so grateful to have the 2 spreaders to make this happen. This is one of the things that actually went well with regards to silage and grazing in 2024. Okay, back to negatives. Our first cut silage was late. We cut it on the 11th of May. That's late for us. I know it's early for most people. And the crop we got was pretty disappointing as well. Just not the same bulk as years previous, even though it had been left to grow for longer. A few other small things to mention which did have an impact. We reseeded 16 acres of silage ground, and in the end we only got 1 cut of silage off it, whereas previous years we would have got 4. The weather continued to not play ball throughout the whole summer, whether it was desperately trying to race against the rain to get silage in, or getting silage trailers stuck because we had to leave ground until it dried out in June instead of cutting it in May. The whole year was just a challenge and a struggle, and it's been reflected in how much silage we have in our silage pit. And that lack of silage being produced, combined with the increased demand because the grazing year was awful, means that we're now short of silage, which takes us back to my plan to solve that problem. So I have to admit, I have always been pretty anti-feed wagon. Our simple block feed system just worked. But when I realized how short of silage I was going to be in September, I knew I had to do something different. So I decided I would try and get a feeder wagon, and I started looking on the second-hand market, planning to buy one. And the day after that decision, I kid you not, the day after, I had a visit from Kvernland. And the wonderful folks at Kvernland Ireland offered me this Silage King feeder on demo for 6 months. The timing was so perfect, I couldn't have made it up. It was just meant to be. To be honest, I didn't even know that Kvernland was the importers for Siloking. I thought Kvernland just made ploughs and mowers. So when they showed up, I expected to maybe get some ploughing advice or even perhaps a demo of a new mower. But no, they wanted me to demo a feeder wagon at the exact moment when I desperately needed a feeder wagon. Can't believe I just said I needed a feeder wagon. Oh. Long story short, I now have a feeder wagon. I've been using it for a few days just to get used to it before I try and video anything, and I'll be honest, I'm pretty impressed so far, but that's for a different video. This video, we are focusing on my 500 ton silage shortfall and the plan to address that. So step one of the plan was to quantify the problem. So yesterday I measured how much silage was left in our silage pits, and because I do this every year, I could accurately compare with this time last year. And when I did that, I found out we were 240 tons short on 5th cut and 260 tons short on 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th cut. Now the reason for this shortage, as I explained, was lower yields due to the weather and also extra buffer feeding over the summer to make up for the difficult grazing season. So whilst the 500 ton shortfall figure is technically true, in reality it's more like 410 because the 5th cut was 16% dry matter. So if you consider that plus the fact that we had some leftover silage in April 2024, our critical shortfall is probably closer to 300 tons, but let's say 350 tons because we need to have a very small buffer built in there just to account for errors in my calculations. Step 2 of the plan is to assess the current situation. So part of that was measuring the silage, but we also needed to take silage samples to see the protein levels, energy levels, and dry matter levels. Here's 3 samples of this silage. It's kind of all over the place, but energy levels are okay, protein levels are disappointing, and the dry matters range anywhere from 23 to 33%. Step 3 of this plan is to seek expert advice. I have never made a TMR before, I have never used a feeder wagon, so I have brought in a nutritionist from Fame Valley Feeds who supplies all of my dairy nuts to help me fine-tune our approach. Laura, the nutritionist, I actually think she might be a doctor. Yeah, let's go with that. Dr. Laura took my requirements for saving over 2 tons of silage a day and worked out what we should do. So here is the plan. The dairy cows will be getting 3 kilograms a day of a high protein blend along with 3 kilograms a day of soya hulls. This is obviously per cow, that's not total. The feed given to the cows in the milking powder will be reduced by approximately 4 kilograms a day, giving us an increased feed rate over last year of just 2 kilograms a day. That extra 2 kilograms of feed will be replacing 8 kilograms of silage fresh weight, which is where we get the saving. For this to work, this silage cannot be offered to the cows. If it was, they would eat it. Cows are extremely greedy. So during the night, the feed passage will be empty, but hopefully, in theory, this won't affect milk yields because the soya hulls will provide the same level of energy, it just won't provide the fill factor. That 8 kilograms a day per cow saving is just over half of what we needed to get to the 350 tons, and we can't push it any further with the dairy cows because we have to maintain a minimum amount of silage for rumen health. So where are we getting the rest of the shortfall? Well, we are going to use the same strategy of restricted silage intake being replaced with meal on the beef animals and also the heifers. This won't save a lot, but every little will really help. The final part of the plan is to keep less cows. Since we're closed with TB, the only option to achieve this is to cull. So on Monday, I am PDing my cows, and there will be double-digit culls in the next 2 weeks. I do not have the luxury of carrying passengers this year, and my culling policy is going to be pretty ruthless. Step 4 is to implement the plan. The current mix you're seeing is just a blend with silage. We are not yet restricting silage intakes. On Friday, we have the soya hulls and the other 2 blends arriving, and from then on, we will be going into the full plan, including restricting silage intakes to the dairy cows, the beef cattle, and the heifers. Step 5, reviewing the results. We are going to assess what is working and what isn't working and adjust as needed throughout the winter. As I said earlier in this video, I am taking a pretty extreme approach early on, and my hope is that I find out that I do have some surplus of silage building up. If that's the case, I can probably push a little bit more back into the cows. If it's not the case and I find I am still going to be short of silage, I really don't have a lot of options to cut back on silage and feed more meal. So it's probably going to be a case of having to try and buy some extra silage in on the farm, which is not something I want to do. It's going to be expensive, the silage is going to be bad, so let's just hope that doesn't happen. So that's the plan, and hopefully we won't run out of silage come springtime. It's going to be very, very interesting for me to see how such a dramatic change to my feed system pans out. And all of you get to enjoy the journey with me without having to take the financial risk or deal with the stress of implementing such a big change. Once again, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. Consider subscribing. Now would be a good time because you'll get to follow this journey over the next few months. And if you have any comments or any tips on how to maximize the use of a feeder wagon, stick them down below. I would really love to hear them. Right, I'm going to get my hair cut.